you very much. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Today is November the 8th, and this is a meeting of the Metropolitan Water District Representatives Caucus, a special meeting of the Board of Directors of the West Basin Municipal Water District. So, with that, we'll determine if we have a quorum. E.J. Caldwell, if you please do a roll call.
Happy to do so, President Houston. Director Don Deere. Here. Director Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Harold Williams. Director Desi Alvarez. President Scott Houston.
Here.
Quorum.
Very well. 3 out of 5 are here, and I think Director Williams might be on his way. So with that, we'll move into public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak this time?
President Houston, we have not received any requests for public comment for today's meeting, though this meeting is being held both virtually and in person. If there's anybody that would like to make public comment, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And President Houston, I do not see any requests for public comment.
Very good. Thank you, EJ. And Director Williams has now arrived, so he is present.
You weren't waiting on me.
No, we're not waiting on you.
All right. Very good. Very good.
Yeah. All right. Okay. With that, so we're going to move on into our discussion items. 4A, EJ, if you could take that item up for us, please.
Yes, thank you very much, President Houston. Let me begin by letting you know that this item actually was included on our agenda at our last month's caucus meeting. Unfortunately, at that time, we did run out of time. And fortunately, we do have an entire host of Met staff here to walk us through this item. Item 4A is the draft long-range finance plan needs assessment. And introducing this item and kind of leading the effort, and again, she has her entire team here, is Katana Kassane, the Assistant General Manager and Chief Financial Officer of Metropolitan Water District.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, everybody. And really glad to be back to talk to you guys about this long-range finance plan. Just you should know that we're calling it a draft here, but we're furiously working hard to revise it into an adopted item next week by the board. So there's a little bit of, and we can definitely talk to you a little bit if we need to, if we have time, about some of the key changes that we've made. They're not tremendous, but there are some key changes we made for this document that will be adopted by the board on Tuesday, I believe. And so with me is Adam Benson, our finance group manager, and Anna Vandenberg, who is our budget and revenue section manager. Or I always get that wrong, whether it's revenue and budget or budget and revenue, but he's accepted this, by the way. And I see Sam Smalls, who are debt treasury and debt manager, who just popped in. So we're all here to listen and have a conversation about a long-range finance plan. So I will turn it to Anna, if anybody else, unless Adam, you guys want to say anything else for now.
No, I think we're good. Arnell can give a brief overview of the original findings. This is the same presentation that would have been presented at the last meeting, as EJ mentioned. We wanted to bring it back, and over the next couple of days, we will be releasing the public version that is hopefully the final, as Catano mentioned, and that will go to the board on November 14th. So some of those updates are not yet reflected in this PowerPoint because we're working on that simultaneously to this presentation, but we can, after we give a brief overview of this, can dive in just at a high level to some of the changes that we're making. I think that's a good way to go, Catano. So Arnell, take it away.
And before Arnell starts, as he starts to put that up, when we say final, we're talking about final for this phase 1. There's going to be a phase 2 of this item when we complete our camp process. So this is just for phase 1. Thank you. Anna?
All right. Hi there, everybody. Well, we have somewhere on the order of 30 slides, so we'll try and move it along here to make sure we have time for questions. And as so first off, as Catano mentioned there, so this is, you know, staff has embarked on essentially a 2-phased approach to developing its Metropolitan's long-range finance plan. This is the needs assessment document, and it is not the long-range finance plan. Instead, it's the first step to engage the board to go co-develop the long-range finance plan. And the primary objective of this needs assessment is to provide a range of cost and rate impact for the 4 IRP scenarios that will inform the camphor water process and assist the board in selecting a resource development portfolio to pursue while weighing its resilience, reliability, financial sustainability, and affordability objectives. And as can be seen on this slide here, which someone already advanced to, fantastic. This is kind of our integration with the other processes going on at Metropolitan, including the IRP, which is the top left there, which we use the IRP phase 1 and the findings to develop this needs assessment. And again, that'll make its way into the camphor water process. As part of the camphor water process, we will be evaluating projects and portfolio as needed. And then as specific projects and portfolios are identified that, again, meet those board objectives, we will refine this projection and essentially create a more traditional looking long-range finance plan with those projects in it. Next slide, please. So really quickly on the modeling period, the initial modeling period was a 10-year period through 2032, which mirrored essentially our 10-year projection that this is queued off of. As part of the request by the board, we are adding a section to the final long-range plan and needs assessment that'll go through 2045. That'll mirror the modeling period through the end of the IRP. Next slide. So this slide graphically depicts the modeling process. Essentially, for each of the IRP scenarios for each year, we're taking the resource development needs and then multiplying it by the estimated resource unit cost to obtain the resource development cost. And again, we're not looking at specific projects here. We're just looking high level at generically what it would cost to develop these various resources. And then in addition, we're adding the fixed cost derived from the current 10-year financial forecast, and then calculating the variable cost based on the supply and demand conditions for that particular scenario. So the result is the total revenue requirements, and then when dividing that by the total water transactions, we arrive at the overall rate increase. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes the 4 IRP scenarios from the 2020 IRP needs assessment. And as a reminder, they had scenarios A, B, C, and D with varying amounts of climate change, regulatory impacts, and economic growth. The scenarios with the severe climate impacts were scenario C and D. And D has the highest demand as a result, and as a result has the highest magnitude and frequencies of shortages, as can be depicted on the graph on the right. Next slide, please. So here we summarize the resource gap from smallest to largest for each of the 4 scenarios. We have scenario A with no additional resource development is needed in that one, and then scenario D, which has the largest resource gap requiring the most significant level of resource development. Next slide. So this slide shows the projected water demands for each of the 4 IRP scenarios, including the dotted line showing the assumption for the current budget and 10-year forecast. The demands assumed for that budget were actually closest to the scenario D there. Next slide. And this, as an example, shows the detailed slide of the amount of resource development that is needed for each of the scenarios that was produced by the IRP. So this is the scenario D, and the table on the right shows the resource development broken up into storage and core supplies for each year. And then the 3 colored columns refer to the amount of additional storage being developed. So the first column being with no storage, the middle column in orange being the amount of core supply that's needed when adding 250,000 acre-foot of additional storage. And then the column on the far right in green is when adding 500,000 acre-foot of additional storage. So for this initial 10-year projection, we're going to be focused on the resource needs through 2032, which is the column highlighted in yellow here. In the next slide, we summarize the resource development needs in 2032 for all the 4 scenarios. And again, the table shows the amount of core supplies needed depending on the amount of additional storage that's added, either no additional storage, 250,000 acre foot, or 500,000 acre foot of additional storage. And as you see, looking at scenario D there, we're either needing 300,000 acre foot of additional core supply if no storage is added, or 200,000 acre foot of additional core supply when either 250 or 500,000 acre foot of storage is added. Next slide. So this slide shows the assumed resource development cost on a dollar per acre foot basis, including O&M and capital financing for some comparable projects. And just to make sure we're all on the same page here, for the IRP modeling terms, the word core supply refers to supplies that are available every year, regardless of hydrology. This is to differentiate it from flex supplies, which are more purchased year in year as needed, kind of akin to spot transfers. So for core supply, we looked at various different projects. We've highlighted some of them here. Carlsbad desal is currently operating at $2,975 an acre foot. Santa Barbara desal was a little higher at $3,126. We also had the Ventura County Pure Water project, which was estimated to have a unit cost of $3,266 an acre foot. So for modeling purposes here, for this needs assessment, we've assumed that it would be available at $3,000 an acre foot. Then looking at the cost of storing, we've assumed $300 an acre foot of storage. Note, however, this is a different unit rate because it's $300 per stored capacity, right? So it's a different unit rate than that 3,000, which is $3,000 divided by the yield, right? It's a different note. And again, looking at some different projects that were used to help estimate that, we took the current took DVL. If you did the present value cost of that, of cost of construction, and you finance that, you would end up with somewhere around $269 an acre foot. We also had some information from a Chino storage basin, which had a range of between $275 and $325 an acre foot. And we did provide the information here for flex storage, but again, the IRP assumed that the additional needs for the resource development would be met by core supplies. So the price that was assumed here for flex storage really doesn't have an impact on it. We will, however, be evaluating other alternative and projects in the Camp for Water process, which will include various flex supplies. It's just that in this particular modeling here, mirroring what was done in the IRP is not of a core consequence. Next slide. So this slide shows the overall impacts of the 4 IRP scenarios when no additional storage is added. And in addition, we have the orange bar that shows the 10-year financial forecast from our current budget, just for reference. IRP scenario B and C produce overall rates similar to our existing 10-year financial forecast. Scenario A is somewhat higher at 6.2% as a result of having lower water demands. And the highest cost scenario was scenario D, which had an average annual increase rate of about 8.4%. So now focusing in on that scenario D at 8.4%, let's evaluate the effect of adding additional storage on the next slide. So this slide shows either adding no additional storage, 250,000 acre foot, or 500,000 acre foot of storage. And we observe that on average, when adding 250,000 acre foot of storage, it leads to the lowest rate impact of 7.1%, essentially due to the significant decrease needed in the core supply, which goes down to 200,000 acre foot. And now we'll follow that 7.1% on to the next slide, and we'll look at a sensitivity analysis. Thank you. So the question is, what would happen if we plan to build the IRP scenario D with the 250,000 acre foot of storage, but then realize the lower demands in IRP A? So we observed that the annual average rate increase could be substantially higher, up to the order of somewhere around 11% per year. Next slide, please. On the other hand, if we don't develop these resources, we could be facing shortages as projected by the IRP. And these water shortages will have economic costs. So the question is, what level of resource development does the board want to pursue in light of its reliability, resilience, affordability objectives? Just a small note on the slide, the net shortages that are in the table on the bottom left there, those percentages are slightly off. We'll be correcting those in the updated presentation we'll provide to the board. Next slide. So this slide looks more closely at the investment needs required in IRP scenario D. We've made some rough estimates of the amount of capital and came up with around $5.5 to $6 billion worth of projects. This amount of resource development will come with substantial financial impacts and challenges. So looking at the engineering challenges here, developing 200,000 acre-foot of core supply by 2032 represents approximately 1.5 pure water projects in Southern California. And again, they would have to be completed by 2032. Similarly, on the storage capacity, that's around a third of the Diamond Valley Lake, again, completed by 2032. And then on the financial challenges side, that is a substantial amount of capital investment, so that we do have some limitations on our revenue bond capacity and our cash flow constraints for that debt service coverage. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of resource development projects to consider in the Camp for Water process. And you'll have to note that not all of these projects neatly fit into either the core supply or flex supply boxes. And as such, additional IRP analysis will be done to evaluate each of these and other projects. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that came up with, can we meet this additional supply needs in the IRPD with conservation? So looking at the next slide here, we have a table that shows our most utilized conservation incentives in 2022. Many believe that much of the future conservation savings could come from non-functional turf replacement. So we're going to be focusing on that in the slides going forward. That's shown here on the bottom at roughly the $2 per square foot rebate. So looking at that amount of participation, we can look at the next slide. And the question is essentially how much conservation is available in turf replacement. So if we looked at that $2 per square foot incentive in 2022 provided 24,000 acre foot of conservation. If we doubled that incentive to say $4 a square foot, how much additional conservation incentives will we get? We're essentially asking what the price elasticity of conservation is, and we don't actually have that information available at this time. So we might need to do some further study to investigate that. Next slide. But even without knowing the price elasticity and availability, there are some observations about meeting the resource development needs with conservations that can be made. So one thing that's unique about conservation is that you're front-loading the expenditures while you're receiving the benefits over time. So in this case, it's assumed that you would continue to receive the benefits of those savings over a 30-year time frame, at least as it relates to turf removal. So for example, if we tried to meet the entire core resource supply needs identified in scenario D with turf replacement, we would need to add roughly 37,500 acre foot per year to meet the 2032 target. So here, assuming that that $4 an acre foot, which amounts to somewhere in the order of $1,000 per acre foot, but again, because it needs to be front loaded, right? You get that dollar, you spend $1,000 and you get 1 acre foot of savings over 30 years, but that's essentially saying you need to spend $30,000 in year one and you get that 1 acre foot of savings over the next 30. So to achieve 300,000 acre foot of annual savings by 2032, you need to spend somewhere in the order of $1.1 billion per year on conservation, which is a huge challenge. Next slide, please. So one benefit of conservation, though, is that it can be curtailed or cut off if conditions change. So if water demands are lower than projected, or if water supplies situation improves, Metropolitan can adjust or remove the conservation program along the way. And this is unlike the construction of additional resources where conservation spending does not create a new fixed cost. So if Metropolitan observes a natural reduction in demand, conservation spending can be reduced. Next slide, please. So now, instead of incentivizing that conservation, what would be the rate impact if it was mandated? So in this scenario, no new resource development was added, but instead assumed regulatory action mandated conservation at no cost to Metropolitan. So beginning with the projected demand in D and then gradually reducing the demands to meet the 2032 resource development goal of $300,000 acre foot. And as you would guess, this produced the lowest rate on Metropolitan as there's no financial cost, but member agencies and their sub-agencies would probably incur costs for enforcement. So if we find that conservation savings will come from turf replacement, really the question is who's going to pay for it? If Metropolitan doesn't provide an incentive, the overall rate increase could be substantially lower, as low as 5.4%. Next slide. So this slide provides a summary of the overall rate impact of all of the IRP scenarios, excluding the draft conservation findings. And again, includes the orange bar showing our current 10-year financial forecast for reference. We show here the overall rate increases in 2032, and in orange, the percent of the cumulative rate impact from the adopted 2024 rate. And now I'm going to hand it off to Sam's to go over some capital financing consideration slides. Sam?
And thank you, Arnold. And Sam, if you can just summarize in total some of this so we can get questions, would be really appreciated.
Yes, actually, that was my intent,
Yeah.
Gaetano, because I know we've given this presentation a few times, and we certainly would like to get input on it. But my name is Sam Smalls. I'm the Treasury and Debt Manager at Metropolitan, and I'm responsible for Treasury operations, which includes investments as well as debt management. And as you can imagine, would involve the access to the capital markets to fund Metropolitan's capital investments, as well as the administration of that program. Next slide, please. And so we've got a little bit of a Goldilocks problem here when we were dealing with the development of the long-range finance plan. And part of the reason why we have a phase one is because we recognize that we needed to give some high-level information, which are now just went through in terms of rate impacts. But what we also wanted to do was to provide some context in terms of the implications of funding and financing this approach. And so the Goldilocks problem is not giving you too much information in the weeds that it's not helpful, but then not giving you enough information to be able to make some decisions and how to proceed forward in the Camp for Water process. When it comes to capital funding, you really have three buckets. That's grant funding, which we have made a concerted effort at Metropolitan to pursue more so, which has not been consistent with our past practices. And that's generally free money. It's the cheapest form of funding, and you want to maximize that. And that's something that I think will make a big difference, but in terms of our ability to realize the capital investments that's before us. But the challenge that we have there is that it could trigger certain costs that otherwise would not be there. And that's what we call federalizing the project. In addition, we have PAYGO funding and then debt funding. PAYGO funding is our way to fund some of those projects with cash, our operating revenues, so that we don't over leverage. But leveraging is important, and it is helpful because it does spread costs out over time so that future ratepayers are also paying their fair share. And that's what we refer to as intergenerational equity. Next slide, please. So Metropolitan has access to many different types of debt to fund its capital investments. Its primary credit card, if you will, is the revenue bonds. And we also have another credit card, the general obligation bonds program, which we don't have any current authorization for. But you can think of that as our platinum card and our revenue bonds as our gold card, and certificates of participation as our Discover card. But when issuing debt, Metropolitan takes into consideration several factors, like the timing of when the debt is actually needed, so we're not issuing too much and paying that extra interest expense and not issuing too little so that it impacts the engineering team's rate of spend to manage the projects appropriately. We also take into consideration our impacts on credit ratings to make sure that we're meeting the various metrics to maintain our high level of ratings, which is AAA and S&P, AA1 from Moody's, and AA plus from Fitch. And then obviously we monitor the capital markets in terms of interest rates to try and get the lowest cost of capital that we can when we need the funds. And then compliance with our rate covenants and additional bonds test, which is the legal test that we have to comply with when issuing debt. And then one of the big issues for us, especially from a planning perspective, is thinking about debt capacity. And next slide, please. So in terms of debt capacity, I will just say this, that we will provide some additional information in the update that is forthcoming next week and share with you. But in the report itself, we showed that we're going to be constrained in terms of our ability to issue debt using our revenue bonds for the $5.5 to $6 billion in costs that are now shared earlier. So for us, really the goal is to figure out how can we piece together a strategy of using the different credit cards potentially to effectuate the needs of the program, the capital program for IRPD. So in terms of the next steps for the Camp for Water process, we will determine what level of resource development the board wants to pursue in light of these themes of resiliency, reliability, financial sustainability, affordability, and equity. We will also conduct a detailed study to recommend and to understand capacity and price elasticity for conservation. And then lastly, we will evaluate the rate impacts for specific projects and or portfolio of projects, more importantly, to meet the board approved reliability objectives. Next slide. And then in terms of the timeline, I think we pretty much are at the end of this. So this is kind of dated, but we have conducted quite a few presentations, as alluded to earlier, to the board in August, and then a follow-up in September to various member agency and caucus workshops like this, as well as to the subcommittee on regional planning, as well as presentations in the Camp for Water process. And I'll hand it back to you, Katano.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you, Arnaud. AJ, we'll take it back to you for questions from the board.
Great, thank you all. I really appreciate that, and I do want to open it up to any questions from those who are here physically or online. So unless EJ, do you have anything to add on this?
No, the only thing I could touch on is just the amount of work that's been put into this. Obviously, the Metropolitan Water District team has been presenting on this process now, not just through the Camp for Water process, but dating back to the original discussions of the IRP. So I definitely want to say thank you very much to Katano, but of course the entire Met staff as far as all the effort that's been put into it so far.
Yeah, and actually, thank you. Yes. We missed one quick thing, Director Houston. Adam, should we touch about what changes are we making and what the board should anticipate for next week? Sorry, yeah. I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We can give a quick high-level overview of what we're doing in this final version that's going to deviate a little bit from this presentation. The main change is that we have been asked by the board to extend our forecast from the original 10-year perspective that we included and presented to you today to a 20-year horizon. So we're going out to 2045, I believe. So it's really like a 22-year perspective. That will line up with the exact dates that are included in the IRP for scenarios A, B, C, and D. with respect to their proposed resource development and supply gaps. So that's the main thing that you're going to see is we're sort of building out the model to accommodate for the additional resource development that we would need to meet the reliability targets in each of the scenarios. Functionally, it's not really changing the story that we're telling in this IRP, right? In this original version of the presentation. The numbers move in terms of the average rate impact because we're spreading the cost over a longer period of time. And as a result, you kind of see a slight reduction in the overall average rate impact, but each of the different areas directionally, it's very similar. So that's the main piece of the analysis that you'll see in the next version. Sam also expanded his debt capacity analysis to align out to 2045 as well. But it's a similar story, right? Same pressures exist over the 10-year period that we expect to exist over the 20-year period. Beyond that, we're adding some Q&A. So we've received some questions and comments from different groups. Different member agencies have reached out to us, submitted those letters. We've answered those questions, and we've received some individual questions from other member agencies and caucuses, and we're putting together a little Q&A that will also be included in the final draft version, just brief comments and perspectives from our staff. So that's largely what you're going to see in the next version, which hopefully should come out of the next day, Katano. We're working.
Yeah, I think it's posting tomorrow. So if you guys are looking, you'll
perfect.
probably
Okay.
get it tomorrow. So, and if not, yeah, I think you will post either later today or tomorrow. Thank you. So take
Thank
it back to you, Director Houston.
Great, thank you. So, any questions or comments on this?
Chair
Okay,
Houston.
yes, Director Gloria Gray, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to kind of echo what EJ said. I want to thank Met staff because this is a very important process. And I appreciate the update because the board did ask that they look at a 20-year forecast. So I just want to thank staff and reiterate the fact that it's a very important process that Katana and her team is providing for the board. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just have a question or to make sure I'm understanding, because this is going to be on the agenda next week, right? And it posts tomorrow thereabouts.
Yes.
And it's still just in draft form?
No.
What exactly is the presentation for next week to the full board?
So the presentation will be an updated PowerPoint that you see. We typically just update the PowerPoint to reflect the new scenarios going to 2045 and adding all the questions that people have asked. So those will be attached. But the main body of the document will no longer say draft. It will actually say I'm not sure what it's gonna say, but it's gonna probably say long range finance.
It'll say adopt.
Plan needs
Adopt,
assessment.
yeah.
Adopt. It's gonna say adopt. And again, I reiterate this fact. This is our initial assessment. So we need to go, for example, we need to go back to the camp process to pick the portfolio of the projects. That process, if you saw Arnaud, the very second slide he showed, we will then take all those projects. If once the board has evaluated the criteria and picked the projects that we want to move forward with, we will then come back and say, to meet those obligations with these projects, here's the true cost or projected costs that we can assign. And so this document, probably sometime in the summer of next year, will be revised into the long-range finance plan. This assessment is a tool that will help the board, guide the board on what costs look like for different items as we go through this process.
Very good. Thank you. That helped clarify it for me. And then the other thing is, so I understand this has been in the works for quite some time, and I'm going to ask in part EJ too on this. So regarding West Basin, even now, and when this comes out for next week, our member organizations can still certainly talk to West Basin, as well as directly to Met, with any concerns, or how does that process work?
That's correct. West Basin hosts workshops with our retail agencies with regularity. On top of that, I've been meeting with each of them individually to collect some feedback. It's not just about West Basin Municipal Water District, but of course Metropolitan Water District as well. The issues that are, I think, very well presented in this presentation are very complex. When you talk about the long-range financial plan and then you integrate that with CAMP, I think that the discussions have been plentiful and robust, but ultimately we need to get these items in front of the board. And I think that's where Caetano's job is difficult as far as collecting the feedback from the board of directors, and then of course working within the general managers. And I think that you're going to start to see that discussion evolve. I know that the chairman is working with the general manager of Metropolitan Water District to create a task force of general managers and board members to work on this piece along with CAMP for water. And I would expect that that group would be working diligently to make decisions and move the ball forward.
And then this is presented in which committee?
This item will be presented in the finance committee. This will be a fair committee. And to reiterate what EJ just said, it's an assessment tool that will help our CAMP process. And I do believe, I don't know, EJ, if you're part of that team, but there are now 12 at least GMs who are going to join the board and our staff in that CAMP process task force that will then be receiving and asking more questions on all these things as we move this process forward. So, but it goes to finance, but it will also be a board report, because if we're adapting it, we will report it all through to the board.
Great, thank you. And I did assume it was the finance, but I never make assumptions, right? So with all that, I don't even know if one or both of our directors are on the finance committee at Metropolitan, but I assume we have been putting our input into this process, EJ, along the way.
That is correct. Both of our directors have been very engaged, and I know that the materials that have been produced by Metropolitan Water District staff, they have several different white papers, and I know that Director Alvarez has provided a lot of comments and thoughts, and both of our directors are very engaged on the issues.
Our caucus, so it's the time we can talk about this in an open session. So, I really haven't heard the perspectives that have come out of our own agencies. So at some point, I guess you'll have to brief me. I know we have some other member agencies who are present or on the call, and ultimately West Basin, we represent a significant amount of communities. So I just, think that we have to make sure that we're getting their voice. And I know you did a good job with that, EJ, but, we need to have a better understanding sometimes of what our position is. All right, anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much, Caetano, and your team. And yes, it's very complicated. I'm looking forward to see how this continues to evolve, as you mentioned, and over the next handful of months as well. And what programs we're going to look at, get those significant resources, some very big decisions for the networks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we're
Thank you.
always ready to come back as long, we invite us, we'll come back. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. So we'll go to item 4B, as in boy. EJ, if you'll let us or introduce that item, please.
Yes, thank you very much. The next item, 4B, is Future Supply Actions Funding Program. And introducing this item is Warren Tights, the Resource Development Manager at Metropolitan Water District. Warren.
Great, thank you, EJ. We're very happy to be here. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Future Supply Actions Funding Program. It is one of Metropolitan's primary innovation programs. And it's a great example of Metropolitan collaborating with our member agencies to really move the ball forward on local supplies. So I'm on the agenda, but giving the presentation today is Jonathan Jordan. He's an associate resource specialist on the resource development team, a key member of the Future Supply Actions Funding Program team as well. And Jonathan, take it away.
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to West Basin today to talk about our upcoming Future Supply Actions Funding Program. I'm Jonathan Jordan, as Warren mentioned, and I work under Warren in the Water Resource Management Group. I'm also one of the points of contact for the FSA. So if you have any questions after this meeting, please feel free to contact me. Next slide, please. A quick overview of today's presentation is the program background and details on the upcoming funding round, and then a tentative schedule and RFP guidelines and requirements. Next slide. The FSA Future Supply Actions Funding Program was established in the 2010 IRP. Since 2010, we've funded 2 rounds, or Metropolitan has provided 2 rounds of funding to member agencies, one in 2013 and the other in 2018. The goal of the FSA program is really to drive innovation by piloting new approaches, removing barriers, and providing a regional benefit through exchange of information and regional collaboration. The FSA program really focuses on driving an innovative water resource development for groundwater, stormwater, reuse and recycled water, and desalination methods. Next slide. 4 program elements for the FSA include up to $500,000 of funding per member agency or per study. Metropolitan requires a dollar for dollar match on the funding amount from the member agency. The program really is meant to fund 2-year studies. And the proposals solicited through this RFP will be selected by an expert panel, and they must meet minimum criteria for consideration. Next slide. This year, we plan to bring back the Metropolitan-hosted FSA Symposium. And what the symposium really does is allows participating FSA program Round 3 participants to really celebrate and showcase the results of the FSA. So we want to bring this back. It'll be a hybrid event around 2 years after the initiation of the program. Next slide. The following slides feature studies that West Basin has led or partnered with in previous FSA rounds. Several West Basin studies have been considered an extreme success for the program, and we welcome any future. We welcome and are excited to see any future studies that West Basin brings to us. In 2013, Metropolitan funded 13 studies, 3 of which West Basin participated in, and they were mostly focused on the recycled water and seawater desalination fields. Next slide. West Basin participated with one project regarding seawater desalination in the Bryan Producers Shear Mortality Study. I want to take a quick moment to also recognize that all of the studies and reports and presentations are available on the Metropolitan website. So please have a look, see what has previously been done, explore what other member agencies contributed to in this FSA funding program. Next slide. Looking forward to the current FSA funding round. The 3rd FSA round will fund up to 8 studies for no more than $3 million. The program will provide up to $500,000 of funding per member agency per study. Because we're funding smaller amounts of studies this year, we plan on issuing the next RFP in 2025 or 2026. So if you can't make the deadline for this FSA RFP, we will be opening the program up in the next couple of years. Some minor changes for streamlining efforts in this round include removing retention on the invoicing requirements and also allowing member agencies to have an array of flexible invoicing options for the study. We're also including a 1-year extension provision that will allow member agencies to request that we extend the study for 1 year to account for some delays or whatever it may be. This year, we're also incentivizing member agency partnership with a 5% scoring bonus on proposal. The partnership will require a lead member agency and 2 additional partner member agencies to qualify for this scoring benefit. Next slide. We're diligently working on releasing this RFP, and I hope to release it in the next couple weeks. We will send an email and place any RFP materials on the FSA website, so please keep a lookout if you're interested in participating. Tentative schedule we have drafted here. Have proposals due in January or early part of 2024, with agreements being signed between the first quarter and the second quarter of 2024. We're really looking to start work on these studies and pilot tests by Q1 in 2025. The RFP is open to all member agencies, and member agencies can partner with any other member agency or entities. However, proposals from partnering member agencies must be submitted by a single lead designated member agency. I want to echo again that we are incentivizing partnerships with the 5% scoring bonus. So partners must contribute at least $10,000 to qualify for this bonus. This slide is another question we'd like to preemptively answer, and it's what studies or pilot tests qualify for that funding program. The program may include pilot tests, bench scale studies, demonstration studies, or anything that sort of involves integration, innovative treatment, or innovative processes and new technologies. The program does not include existing studies or construction and design of full-scale projects. We're also trying to avoid having too many similar studies or repeated prior studies. So I echo that. Please look at the FSA round 1 and 2 studies to see if this has already been done, because this is a core burden. The key agreement terms for the FSA funding program are a 2-year study or pilot test with a 1-year extension provision. We will require semi-annual reporting, and invoicing will be available depending on the project by quarterly, semi-annually, or deliverable-based basis. The final payment will be held until we receive the final report and presentation copy. And we also encourage member agencies to really participate in the symposium on this coming round. The proposals will be reviewed by a panel of reviewers, 2 are internal metropolitan employees and 2 external. All of the reviewers are subject matter experts. The proposals will be ranked on the evaluation criteria, and I want to highlight that the evaluation criteria places a heavy emphasis on reducing barriers, regional benefit, and innovative process application and technology. The next slide is the last one, so we're happy to answer any questions. Our entire team is available if you want to throw some ideas at us or discuss your potential plans or studies.
Any questions?
Yes, I have one question.
Williams.
Thank you. A great program there. Now, how could you qualify to be a member of the committee or the evaluation team?
Reviewers?
Yes.
We internally selected a list of 5 candidates, and we vetted it through executive management. We're really looking for subject matter experts in like desalination technologies or water reuse technologies. So we want unbiased as possible reviewer panel. Currently, we're working out the final agreements with the reviewers, but we're delaying the project start date for a couple more weeks. So we'll see if there's any more movement on who's going to be reviewing and when.
So what example, a metropolitan board member be one of the reviewers?
Previous reviewers were subject matter experts from the desalination, PhDs in desal, for example, PhDs in water reuse, or similar subject matter experts like those.
So folks like academics from UCLA, USC, this time around, we hope to have an expert on pilot testing and desalination from the Bureau, US Bureau of Reclamation. But to answer your question, the directors would not be on the panel. We can't really have member agency staff or directors because they could be participating in the program itself.
So, but professors from universities are invited, encouraged to participate.
A list in-house, so we didn't have an RFP for the experts. We identified experts that we thought would be good for the program and made a list we recommended a list and then vetted it through our management.
Any other questions? I don't see anyone raising their hands online either. Well, thank you very much. And by the way, that we can partner with agencies should that be something that makes sense for us or them, and they ask us to partner, obviously. So I'm sure that our staff is well aware of how to potentially utilize this program. Ready in the hopper, but at the same time, that makes sense.
We're taking a close look at it, and it's important to note, and it's actually included in slides 6 and 7. West Basin has had tremendous success as far as accessing this program and receiving funds. I think one of the things, having just returned from Water Reuse California, the conference, noting there the first one, the direct potable reuse research initiative. That was something that West Basin Municipal Water District was heavily involved in organizing all of the member agencies to look at this and utilize this program as an opportunity to fund that research. And of course, it was very much celebrated at the Water Reuse Conference over the past few days. So this program was instrumental in that effort.
I'm also just thinking, obviously, there's us, I'm just talking out loud, but Torrance member agency, Long Beach member agency, Central Basin, Compton next door. So, we're kind of in the middle with a few agencies that should they have something that made any sense for one of us to partner, obviously we can look at that, knowing process that's competitive and, obviously making sure we're judicious, but it's good information, a good opportunity. So I encourage staff to look at that, but if it makes sense for us. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Hearing none, I want to say thank you, gentlemen, for being here and the good presentation and your contact info. Really do appreciate that. Let's see. Director's comments and future agenda items. My colleagues, is there any comments?
No, thank you.
Director Gray.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Very good, thank you. I really don't have anything further. I think these were really good presentations. Of course, the first one was quite complex, and I really do encourage our staff to help us make sure we understand everything that's going on at Metropolitan in the context of that study and those materials. What's the next budget cycle for Metropolitan? It's a 2-year cycle. So when's the next 2 years? That coming up?
It is, and I believe Katana's still on. I don't know if she wants to talk a little bit about the timeline.
If not, I can maybe shed some light.
Yeah, just
So we do a biannual budget, so it's a 2-year budget. And the process of finalizing the next budget cycle, which would start in July of 2024 and go to June of 2026. Gotcha. So right now we're at the tail end of the last.
Okay, perfect. Because I didn't remember where we're at now. But yes, okay. So it's all coming up right now. It's going to come up in the new year as we lead into summer, near summer, 2 year. Okay. So there's a lot of things at stake, quite frankly, for the member agencies to make sure we understand. I'm sure the next 2 months we'll probably be getting a lot more information from Metropolitan to us. And with potential up and downs of the water sales, the projects we're trying to fund, what is the rebate program going to continue to cover or not, local project development. So, it's already that time, but we have to be engaged and understand that process. So I would just ask that when that's appropriate, EJ, that would probably be an item on our agenda, even if it's in the January meeting, just to start getting us ready leading up. So, and then obviously we're going to start doing our budget process early next year too. So, okay. Very good. Well, thank you. And I really do appreciate everyone who does show up or watches these later. This is your time for us to try and get information out from member agencies. Even if people are bashful or don't ask questions here, please, by all means, reach out to EJ or his staff and team or one of the directors so that we can make sure your voices are heard appropriately from West Basin to Metropolitan. That's the point of these meetings. And I know we've been working hard to try and make sure that we get good participation. Continue to push and encourage that. And with that, our next meeting is scheduled to be held on December 6th of next month. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.